I'm Bailey Parnell, and this is Let's Think This Through. Join me for drinks as I bring on guests for conversations that inspire, amuse, and challenge us, but in a fun and relaxing kind of way. Ultimately, it's to help us all learn and live a better, easier life. So let's think this through. Hello, and welcome back to Let's Think This Through with me, Bailey Parnell. Today I'll be having drinks with a dear friend of mine who was also named Canada's most admired CEO. And that's because he is the CEO of a big tech company out of Toronto, Canada. But what we really investigated in this episode was just how our identities can become so tied up with those things like our work or our leadership or that sort of stuff. And we get into leadership. We get into what does it mean to be a good leader and what skills do you need and what parts of your life in and outside of work make you a good leader. And let me be clear, that's not just leadership of a company. That's also if you listening are trying to be a leader of self, a leader of your department, a leader of how you govern your family or your home or a community leader, all these sorts of things. We also talk about how his identity goes beyond just being that tech CEO. I mean, what does it mean to be a child of immigrants? What does it mean to be the oldest sibling? We cover all of this and more. So I'm very excited for you to have drinks tonight with my friend, Zak Hemraj. Zak, thank you for coming to have drinks with me.
It's my absolute pleasure, Bailey.
Of course. What are you drinking this evening?
I'm having a rooibos tea. I hope that's okay.
What is rooibos?
I actually never have looked that up. I don't even know what rooibos is. I just know I like the way it tastes.
Yeah, it's like one of those ingredients where when you taste it, it's like you like it and you like it in things and in cocktails. That's where I've seen that, but I still don't actually know what it is.
Yeah, maybe it's a flower or something. I'm going to look it up now.
Yeah, because we're deadly curious and it's a cheap trait. I'm drinking an iced tea, which is actually a lemon ginger tea over ice.
That sounds lovely. Refreshing.
Yeah, it's pretty nice. I mean, we are filming this evening. I was like, oh, what's that going to do? Going to go cocktail mocktail method or going to go chai tea? You name it. All right. You're going to need to introduce yourself to the people.
Oh, well, hi, people. I'm Zak. It's a pleasure to be on the show. So I am the co-founder and CEO of a company called Loopio. Excuse me. Just to give you a bit of a background, what Loopio does, we are a software platform that makes it easier for companies to respond to RFPs. I'm happy to kind of tell you my story when the time is right, Bailey. But I'm just excited to be here and talk about all things tech, entrepreneurship, life, purpose, with friends, whatever you want to talk about.
Yeah, we'll go in any direction. I mean, you're welcome to say your story anytime you want. Where do you consider your story starting?
Where does my story even start? That's such a big question. Look, I'm Canadian children of immigrants, right? My mom came from Pakistan. My dad was born in East Africa in Tanzania. He lived in Pakistan for many years, and that's where he met my mother. They came here in the late 70s, early 80s. So I think that's where my story really starts. But, like many children of immigrants, I had very hardworking parents that, instilled a lot of values in me from an early age. And I am the eldest child of two younger sisters. I think that has also, shaped me over many years. My story, I think from a professional standpoint is like, I am an engineer by trade. So I did my studies in computer engineering. I started my career in software development. Had the pleasure of right out of school, I graduated from Queen's University. I had the pleasure of joining a small startup called I Love Rewards, which eventually became a company called Achievers. And so that was an 8-year journey for me, where we built employee engagement software. So I learned everything from how to write code and how to build software to how to be a leader and how to scale software companies and how to open new offices in different cities and how to build a culture. It was kind of an 8-year masterclass working under some amazing leaders who I have so much gratitude for. And then, eventually took the leap to start Loopio about 10 years ago. So yeah, that's a bit of my story, and happy to kind of unpack whatever you find interesting.
Well, I find everything interesting, Zach. That's why I had to start a podcast so I could talk to people about all of these things in an unconstrained way. And it's funny that you mentioned like child of immigrants and Big Brother and all these sorts of identities, because when I was thinking about having you on and going for drinks, identity was kind of one of the sort of chief categories or chief words even that popped into my head, because we've spoken before about the sort of roles that we play. And for you already, we've heard, tech CEO as this role, or a leader as this role that we play, or in my case with you, I would consider, a friend, a husband, and even a soon to be father. So you name it, right? And I think we should go through all of them, and it's kind of like a nice thread. But one of the things that we've been doing a lot of research on recently is leadership. So I kind of wanted to start with that identity, if you will, and that's you as a leader. So it's funny that you mentioned that through Achievers. You think a lot about leadership and what makes a good leader, but how did you learn leadership skills?
How did I learn leadership skills? I think, how did I learn leadership skills? I think there's the natural kind of learning as a child, like when you're on the field, right? And I think one thing I noticed very early in my kind of development as through academic studies and through university is I think I had this skill set to be able to like understand different perspectives. I always found myself as the person like in between arguments, like, hey, but you're not seeing that person's perspective, and you're not and kind of being Switzerland a little bit, but also mediating, but not being afraid to kind of like move conversations along. And I think that's something I just remember vividly from my childhood, whether it's helping my parents understand my younger sisters or vice versa, or helping friends to see different perspectives. And my favorite, one of my favorite quotes of all time is Aristotle. The mark of a true intellectual is be able to see different perspectives or entertain different perspectives without accepting them. Something like that. I'm probably butchering it.
Yeah.
But I think it's always kind of resonated with me of like, there's something about being approachable, being open-minded, seeing different perspectives, and then having the conviction to, make a decision and help people move forward. So I think there's pockets of that maybe that showed up throughout my childhood, throughout my studies. And then I think the true kind of tactical leadership, I think, came during my time at Achievers, where I was just given countless opportunities as I, continued to grow in my career and got to work. I did this calculation, over my 8 years working at that company, I think I reported to 11 different people. And so, and one of the things, the only constants in a startup is change, right? And so if you're at a startup in a high growth tech company for that many years, you're going to encounter many different cycles, many different changes. And I think just working under a diversity of leaders with different styles and different perspectives, different seniority, that taught me a lot too. And, books, obviously, a big part of it also. So a lot of influences, Bailey, I think, over the years. And then there's the last 10 years of building a company through many different stages. So I forgot if you're asking where my leadership came from or how I would describe my leadership, but that's hopefully a little bit.
No, I mean, where it came from is actually one of the things that I'm interested in, because one of the things that we found is that in our kind of leadership development work and research is that most leaders learn leadership from from leaders that they've had. And it also, I guess, presupposes that we believe leadership is a skill that can be learned. Do you?
I do think it can be learned, and I think that, but I think there's certain skills that maybe come more naturally to certain people, and then there's certain skills that can be learned. But I definitely do think it can be taught, and I think we all have to. I think the key is and I've had the pleasure and the opportunity to train many leaders over the years. Just to give you an idea, like even over the course of 10 years, we've probably hired about 600 people. And I've had many people report to me that I've been able to help. I think a lot of it was their own drive, but I've been able to kind of help grow into that leadership. And I think a lot of it is first self-awareness and understanding kind of what your skills are, where you're strong, but ultimately getting to what is your leadership style. It still is the first question I ask in most leadership interviews is describe your leadership style. And I think, everyone kind of has to find that on their own if they're kind of on this leadership journey. But I do agree that some things that a lot of leadership skills can be taught. And I also agree that there's a lot of elements of leadership that come more naturally to certain people.
Yeah,
And maybe that's based on their environment and their upbringing, right?
Yeah, well, I would say that you already mentioned that there's parts of your upbringing that lent itself more naturally to mediation.
Yes.
You want to say more on that?
Well, I think that maybe taking a step back, I do find that there's a pattern of like the eldest sibling naturally having more leadership attributes. Maybe, I don't know if you found that in your studies or not, or in your research. But I think there's some of that. I think specifically being the eldest child under of a eldest child with parents that are immigrants also maybe amplifies that a little bit too, because you have parents that don't have the cultural context of the environment they're living. So you're almost like translating and helping kind of make sense of the world for your parents also. And so that's maybe an element of it too. So I think it's those are definitely things, but I don't think it's universal. But that was my lived experience.
Well, I mean, I think that would make a lot of sense. Did you actually, translating metaphorically, but were you ever required to actually translate literally in language as well?
No, not as much. Right, my parents were always fluent in English, but I think it's just understanding cultural norms. I think that's was probably what needed to be translated the most, and where I kind of had to carve my own path, right, of what I believed in and try to make sense of my own identity, and all of that. So yeah, it was never any like actual tactical like language translating, but I think translating cultural context is probably the best way I would put it.
And still emotional labor, right? Mental labor on a kid that doesn't. You've obviously turned it into something that works for you, but it always pops up in circumstances you don't expect, as do all of our childhoods.
Yeah, and I think maybe in those are the kinds of situations where you hear stories time and time again of people that have to step up as a child. Maybe they lose a parent. Maybe they, maybe they're put into very difficult circumstances where they have to kind of step up, or the family is in some sort of financial need, and the child has to step up. Like these kinds of hardships. I think that's maybe a universal truth is that like going through kind of some hardship. And in tapping into that sense of responsibility at a very young age, I think is very much in line with kind of leadership attributes, right? When you're leading, it's like you're carving the path forward. You have no one giving you direction. You have to define that direction. You have to be able to provide stability, and things like that. So maybe there's something there.
Well, there's definitely something there. You've actually got me thinking about this kind of in an adjacent field is in education. Have you ever heard of this concept called culturally relevant teaching?
No.
So culturally relevant teaching, CRT, would be this idea that you're going to be able to teach kids better if you can actually understand more about, you guessed it, the culture that they come from and how they relate to things like group dynamics and even group learning and the collective versus the individual and direct feedback versus indirect feedback. That if you can weave their culture into the learning, that you will get a better, into your teaching, that you will have a more likely chance that they will learn. But this is kind of, this is still an adjacent part, but it's a little bit under fire in the US for being any shade of connected to DEI. Now, what you just got me thinking about is as culturally relevant leadership. And I'm just making this up. We can call it, CRL, culturally relevant leadership. And I think what you would do for someone is all these experiences that can feel like tension or can feel like hardship when you were probably coming up and you just want to, be this little Canadian boy out playing with your friends, but then you're trying to make your parents understand why you should be allowed to go out on Saturday night and all these sorts of things, is what makes you a leader. And you seem to you seem to be getting to understanding how that stuff actually has worked for you, would be culturally relevant leadership. And I think that there'd be a lot of people who would be liberated if they could think through how their upbringing and their culture could actually work for them as a leader.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's exactly right. And I can, this is, you hear the terms of like just genuine, authentic leadership, right? I think that's kind of what it's all about, is like understanding, how your story, ties into your leadership style, and making it very personal for yourself and for the folks around you. Absolutely. I think that's a cool term.
Well, what are some other leadership lessons that you've learned along the way?
Leadership lessons I've learned along the way. I think it's really important to have values. And I think this is nothing new, but I do think that, having strong values that ground you as a leader, I think are really important. I do think, again, like finding ways to lean into your strengths as a leader are really important, right? I often go back to even just my engineering roots, and I tell people, look, like my time as like an engineer and as a software developer, like what I learned was being able to deal with complexity. I'm really good at dealing with complexity. I'm really good at translating kind of vast amounts of data and information. I'm really good with numbers and kind of looking at data, and I'm really good with kind of collaboration and kind of transparent collaboration across like a big team, because like they have 50 software developers working in one code base, all looking at each other's work, code reviewing everything. Like it's very vulnerable, right? Like, but that's the kind of environment that I, grew up in. And so I think, very open to kind of, sharing things as their work in progress. And so I think just understanding that, and then, being able to, whatever your weaknesses are, especially when you're building a company, like it's someone else's strength, and like you can, build a team around you that complements. So I think that's big. I think what other big things I think are there front and center. Gratitude is a huge piece. I think to what I try to bring to my leadership. I think most presentations open with some sort of thank you or gratitude, whether it's to customers or to our employees. So I think that's a really important piece. And then, on the other side, being able to admit when you're wrong, I think is another really, important thing as well. But I'm still working for, I'm still under construction. I think this is the thing I try to kind of communicate to like leaders that I'm mentoring too, is that, I kind of share like how the things I'm still reading, the things I'm still trying to develop. But I think leadership is just like a constant work in progress. Because I think a lot of things that even we try to do in a business leadership context are like not normal, right? Like you need to kind of, there's forces that are constantly working against you. And so you do have to kind of constantly counteract those forces. And so
when you say business leadership, what would be the forces that are working for and against?
Good question. I would say for and against. So I think when you're like, that's a really good question. I would say when you're in business leadership, there's naturally competitive forces that are working against you, whether it's your own competition, like company competition inside your organization. And so, again, being like not becoming complacent, to those things. I think that businesses, people in general have very short attention spans, right? And so, especially in our world now, and that's definitely something we can talk about, just social media and focus. But I think generally speaking, like you have to repeat, and you have to constantly fight for attention, and you can't kind of be complacent on that front as well. I don't think feedback is normal, right? Like I think the kind of feedback that is needed in a business context, like manager to employee, employee to manager, peer to peer, like the way that we have to communicate feedback and internalize it, it's hard. It's really hard, right? And it's especially hard in a remote world. And so, being open to feedback, knowing how to give feedback correctly, I find like I've had to constantly train and retrain myself on like the right language to use, how to set the context, how to communicate, how to share, your thought process. So I think those are the kinds of things that, again, are just you have to keep your skills sharp, and you have to keep training yourself and keep reminding yourself. Like, because I think a lot of things that we even try to do in business, like I say they're not normal, but they're not easy, I guess, is the right language.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. They are normal, but it's not actually everyone's perspective that leadership is an always on, is an kind of under construction, always on thing. So even for you to say that is interesting to me anyways, because you would meet a lot of folks that subscribe to, I've just been doing this a long time and it's worked, until it doesn't, right? Until those forces of change suddenly are having you in a different world. And if you've not approached it the way that you're suggesting, kind of constant reading, constantly updating, this idea of lifelong learning, that this is a skill that needs to be sharp, as you will, then you're going to fizzle out at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always sort of come back to like, what is your ultimate goal? I think as a leader, right, is to get everyone around you marching kind of in harmony towards some common goal or shared vision, right? Like, I think that is your ultimate goal. And so there's multiple elements to that. One is, constantly defining that goal or that path or that vision. And that could take shape in many different ways on a day-to-day basis. And then the other part is like, how do you drive alignment and get people to row in the same direction, so to speak? Alignment is, I would say, another big core tenet of my leadership, is just like working really hard to drive alignment and make sure people understand the context of decisions and that they're actually, trying to march in the same direction. So if you just take those concepts and try to like extrapolate them a little bit, like there's so much to do, right, on a day-to-day basis, right? Because people are just consuming so much information outside of work, inside of work. It's so easy to like lose sight of all of those things.
Yeah, you've got some good points there, everyone. Listen up, okay? Alignment, repetition. So we've got vision, repetition of the vision. Putting people in alignment means that they are, communicating and ensuring understanding, and even recognition through something like gratitude. So there's a lot of lessons there, which leads nicely to the thought experiment I had for you, actually.
Sure.
Because on every episode, I give people a thought experiment where they can explore an idea and kind of go blue sky scenario. And I have found that some adults, Zach, need prompting on the thought experiment, because instead of thinking blue sky, they think up from what exists right now. Now, I know that you come from, you understand design thinking, so we're going to think unconventional. And I called yours the Fast Track Tech Leadership Program, basically.
Okay.
I thought, if someone was thrust into being a CEO of a tech company and leading it, I want to imagine that you are tasked with creating the perfect sort of fast track leadership program for this person to succeed. Based on your experience, what modules or subjects would you absolutely have to include in this curriculum? So you have the freedom to include, unconventional topics, tools, and approaches to help this leader succeed. And I'm going to say we have to absolutely include at least one unconventional subject. So you're going to
help me with this, or do I have to come up with it up?
No, you can start, but I am more than inclined to participate in thought experiments. It's my favorite thing to do.
So someone is being thrust into this context of being a tech CEO, and we have to come up with some kind of learning plan for them, whether it's courses, materials, topics, etc.
Yeah. So based on your experience, you're like, these are the topics and subjects or skills you absolutely need to cover in this fast track.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. So let me brainstorm a little bit. I think if I even just think about my own learning as a CEO the last 10 years, there is something about like having a mental framework for being able to provide a vision and strategy.
Okay.
Right? Like, and so that's one thing that I think is like super important. Then I think there's another element of like interpersonal kind of like dynamics, like from persuasion to feedback to,
Yeah.
there's something I think kind of in that realm as well. Then I think that there's probably just another like camp of like resilience and just knowing that like being happy every single day is like not your goal, right? Like it's something else. And like and being just understanding how lonely it could be at the top of an organization and like all of the things from and how your physical kind of like exercise and mobility can play a role into your mental health and resilience.
Yes, I love
There's
that.
something like I think there as well, like just for your mindset, right, and your mental health that I think is also important. And then I would say that there's like there's the those are probably the first. And then I think there's like something about that's like probably specific to the domain in which you're like being a leader in, like. And I think it comes back to like really understanding, like talking to customers, like knowing the product, getting into the details, like being comfortable with kind of the problem space that your company is operating in. Like, I think that is another core element that so many leaders, including myself, like again, the natural forces, going back to natural forces, as your company grows, it kind of, you naturally get pushed away from the details and you get pushed away from customer, from the product. And like, you got to find ways to like, bring yourself like back into those things and keep again your skills sharp and understanding of what your company's actually building. So that's a start.
No, this is like a perfect start because you gave 5 different categories and we can pretend that this fast track is like a week long. Okay. Different topic. Okay, everyone. I think I should sell this at Skills Camp. I don't know. I don't know at this point. I was going to say, we're giving you a really great idea that you should all take. But then I'm like, we should take it. So we have, let's start with peak performance, I'm going to call it. And this is, so like when I do peak, which I do have a peak performance coach, and it is very much about how you can, that sort of mind body part that you're talking about, like how do we support our cognition in a way, right? And especially if you start getting into roles where it's not really about what your hands can do, it's more about you're kind of on mentally all day.
Yep.
And so I've been playing with this when we teach like peak performance at Skills Camp, we would talk about Hamza's model of time, energy, and attention, and how time is one aspect of it, but energy and attention is really where it gets interesting because you can actually start making more of it. And the way that you can make more of it is through certain strategies or, your energy, drinking these teas that we're drinking, all these sorts of things to actually make more of it. So this has got to be day one, right?
Yeah, I think that's huge. It's like I do think, yes, like you start with yourself. I know. And that's that's a skill that I think people, that is, I think, again, going back to, it's really hard to lead a large group of people over a long period of time if you're not kind of trying to take care of yourself every single day and actually doing something around that, because again, it fizzles out. So I do think there's something about that peak performance mindset, taking care of your own mental and physical health in order to be able to, provide to your company, to your shareholders, etc.
Yeah.
I agree.
To be of service.
Yeah.
And okay, then we have day 2, and you mentioned there's something about what maybe this would be part of day 1. I don't know. So what it takes to be at the top. So the idea of loneliness, of what comes with a very specific position that literally no one else in the organization can relate to.
Yeah. And it kind of, that's interesting. Can that be a topic on its own?
Yes. Well, I feel like we're doing instructional design now. So welcome to my world. I love this.
I think there's something. Maybe that's the last topic. Like, you know what I mean? It's like you kind of go through the playbook, but then it's like, okay, well, like the last thing is kind of it's like the boss level of the video game, right? It's like, are you sure you want to do this? Like, this is your chance to like back
out.
The
boss battle is, can you handle the top?
Yeah. I think that's like the last level. And I think it's more of just like, because I think there is something about like what it actually means. Like, like be at the top of an organization as your organization continues to grow, the weight that you have to carry, how you have to absorb the personal issues of your entire organization, and how do you compartmentalize that. There's another element of, just understanding that like the sharp swings between highs and lows will only get sharper as your organization continues to grow, right? You can go from a meeting of someone resigning to like, then trying to close a customer, like then to some other kind of personnel issue to like, it just like, you can, so that
context switching.
like, context switching becomes more extreme the larger your organization gets. And so again, it kind of ties back to that first topic of resilience and like your physiology and how it kind of connects to your day-to-day. Absolutely.
I like it. We're going to move outward to interpersonal skills. And you have mentioned some of these. We're going to talk emotional intelligence, including self-awareness. We're going to talk giving feedback, having difficult conversations, and skills of motivation, how to motivate other humans.
Yeah. It's like persuasion and feedback or kind of communication, something like that. Yeah.
So that's day 3. We're getting into vision, strategy, and communicating it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say like the vision strategy piece, there's something about like, I don't know if it's strategic thinking, but it's there is this kind of, it is the ability to like to zoom out to the right altitude and to like being able to think in maybe this like 2 to 3 year context, understanding market forces, understanding, where your world is going without your company. Figuring out how you're either like it's being able to do a SWOT analysis, right? On things like, and that's the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, and so I think there's tools for like strategic thinking, that I think maybe are like whether it's a SWOT analysis or mapping out a 2x2 so you can kind of get pros and cons of going. There's things that kind
mental frameworks, as you said.
Mental frameworks. I think that's a really good way, and then being able to like understand the patterns of like. Of what it actually takes to shape a strategy, because they don't, if you don't do your MBA, most CEOs don't, right? Like this is the stuff they'll teach. So I think strategy people but they usually, it's not the strategy people that end up in the CEO position. So I think there's something about there's something about like being able to, a lot of tech CEOs especially just like emerge into that role, like they take a leap one day and they become a founder. And so I think, understanding some of those frameworks that I think are maybe more prevalent in academia, and understanding how to apply them to a fast growth kind of tech company world, and just something really interesting there.
I think so. And then once you covered all these skills, then in our fast track program, we will say, let's talk about what you actually lead and your domain and details, we'll call it. Domain and details.
Responsibility.
Okay, I know. I think responsibility also has to be part of the day on when you talk to a CEO about what will be different for you. Because now your responsibility as a CEO of an employer is not just to the product or even to the client. You're like, you are part of society. Like you are an employer now. So that's also like thinking about how what you've created contributes to society is an interesting one.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that starts to become more clear. Well, that starts to become a bigger deal, like the bigger your company is, right? Like when you have a few hundred people that you employ, it's like a small town, and like that comes with all of the the waves of emotions and thoughts and ideas that any kind of group of that size would have, and but you naturally start thinking about that. I like it. This is cool. This is a cool framework.
Well, everyone, you're welcome. We've created the best fast track tech leadership program ever. So
Good job.
it only took us 10 minutes of thinking. So I know
beat that ChatGPT.
Yeah, sorry.
I said, beat that ChatGPT.
Yeah, I know. Exactly. No, but 100%, if we were for real creating this, we would be AI supported. I'd just be like, here's some thoughts. Can you write this into a brief? But I know that we spend a lot of time in these spaces, and so our identity, coming back to this theme, can be very much tied up with what it is that you do at work, and especially if you're literally spending time, energy, and attention there, all three of those things. So how do you balance the role as being an in control CEO, dealing with everybody's emotions and issues and all these things, and then going home to a marriage to beautiful Maya, and then gosh, this will be even more important as you have a kid, right?
Yeah. It's a great question, and I'm still trying to figure it out. I think it's again a work in progress, but it's there's definitely things that I've learned over the years, and I think you left one part out, which is like in your context of your CEO all day, like you're the ultimate decision maker for everything. Like it's like the buck stops at you for everything, and so there's the weight of that, and which is like maybe the negative side of like you carry that burden, but the positive side is like you do make the call, and like there are times that I have to even remind myself that like the buck stops at you, and you're able to like make this final decision, and so it is hard to turn that off. It is very.
I bet that's why
it is very difficult, and I will just be very honest about that because I don't think most people are honest about it, and it's. So I think you have to work at it, and you have to the same amount of intensity that I think you put into your work life around understanding frameworks to like think and to communicate. You have to start applying to your personal life, right? Like, from self-help books, from like love languages to like other things like that. You have to.
I absolutely love you.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I love you. I think that I love that approach. If I take this as seriously as I take other things in my life, why wouldn't I use the same learning approaches?
Well, you have to. I think that's kind of if you're putting so much of your emotion and kind of in your intensity towards this, and that like your life outside of work is also extremely important for your longevity as a leader. And I think this kind of goes. This is the bigger thing that I think we've been touching on is that it's all connected.
Yeah.
So how you take care of yourself, how you are in your family and friends, and then how you show up at work as a leader, like they're all very connected to each other. And I think maybe that was less clear to me in my earlier days, and I think as I continue to build, like it becomes more and more clear that they're all connected and they all feed each other. And they can also bring each other down, right? If they're not treated with the same level of care. So I do think there is something about that of like applying, I don't know, maybe an equal amount of weight across those things.
Yeah, and I really wanted to overthink this one with you, and so that's the segment that I chose for you, which was overthinking, where we can kind of take an aspect of the episode and really just analyze it to an amusing extent. And of course, as I've been saying in this theme, I was overthinking identity. So if you were, let's actually strip this back, piece by piece, right? If you were stripped of any references to Lupio, the title of CEO, or your reputation in tech, and you now have to introduce yourself to others without mentioning anything related to your career or accomplishments in business, where do you start? Well, first off, let's start here. Why do you think that we tie our identity to work? And is this good? Is this bad? Is this contextual?
I think we tie our identities to work because that's what we spend a majority of our time on. And I think that, I think as, especially as millennials, like, we grew up in an era, and our careers have been built in an era where I think there's much more demanded from a knowledge worker, right? Like I think it's different if you're working a job where you can actually shut off your work once you leave the office. But as we've entered this informational age, as everything's been digitized, as we have mobile phone access and we take our email and our work home with us, now working in a remote context, like our work is with us all day, and then we're spending the majority of our time on it. And so I do think there is this, like, I think a lot of millennials kind of jive with this concept of work-life integration because we kind of live through that transformation. And I think that I think that's kind of maybe some underpinning behind all of it is the majority of our time, but also like how the demands have maybe shifted versus our parents, generation, that,
Totally.
could actually, and I have a partner in healthcare and she loves her work. And although she does carry some of her, work home with her mentally, like the work does stop, right? When she's home. And I think like a lot of my work, right, happens like when I'm not actually working like on the keyboard.
Yeah, so true.
So I think that's probably why. I mean, I think it also is this, desire to like make something of yourself that, that it maybe is tied to that as well. But I do think it is as simple as like the amount of time that we spend plus the way work has transformed in our lives, right? Just due to the evolving nature of maybe being in a capitalistic society. Like I think maybe it's those things that have maybe driven it. What do you think?
I mean, I think that would all play into it as well. And what you said about noting the millennial timeline is actually quite interesting to me because we do seem to fall a little bit in the middle. Gen X was like, oh, work turns off. And Gen Z is like, oh, you're going to turn work off. Like, and we're just kind of the ones in the middle being like, hustle culture, anyone? Do you remember that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, hustle culture.
Blame the millennials for that one, that's for sure.
Work, like, and really, like, I think we were the generation of like, bringing, like, it was all about like bring your true self to work, like do yoga in the office, but like stay in the office, like, and so
but stay. But stay.
And so that I think we still have this kind of hard knocks kind of work ethic but this kind of desire to just be who we are. I think I've seen a lot of presentations and studies on this kind of concept too, and it resonates with me. I've definitely tried over the last like 20. Work has been a huge part of my identity. It's I also think that's what I wanted, and that comes with sacrifice. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel very fortunate these days. Like since Skills Camp, my identity aligns very much so with what I love to do and what I think the world needs more of, and my purpose, right? So in that way, I'm like, you call it work, but that's because you call it work, right? So there's some things where I can feel even on my day-to-day schedule when it does or doesn't feel like work, right?
Yeah.
So if you had to remove the role as tech leader and as CEO, how would you describe yourself to a stranger? It's a bit of a thought experiment there too.
Yeah. I think I'm a builder. I like to make things. I like to make things that have a positive impact on people's lives. And again, goes back to, if I could just touch on a little bit of my back, like, I got a lot of extreme amount of joy building software as a software developer that people were using.
Right, actually, engineering.
If I reflect back on even like the my past 20 years, I think some of the greatest elements of like joy and flow came in when I was like just like writing code, bringing something to life that I know that people were going to love, right? Like I think that it tapped into something so primal inside me. I have gotten a lot of joy in building an organization, but more importantly, seeing the impact it's made on people's lives and their prosperity, or even the impact that our technology is making on customers. And then I also receive like a huge amount of pleasure, like cooking a meal for my family or friends. And like, it's like, it also taps into that same kind of like, because I made it, like I put I put my heart and my soul into it and I was thoughtful about it. And it was my vision coming to reality. And then ultimately, like, it's not just for, I was never a technologist that was just about the technology. Like, it had to be useful. It had to like make an impact. I was never in love with the tech on its own. And so I think that's a builder that likes to make a positive impact on people's lives.
Yeah, I can see it. A builder and a maker, and that would very much align with your engineering start, right?
Absolutely. I don't know if
So basically, next time you come to New York, we're gonna have to go to one of these like pottery nights where you just have some wine and make some pottery or build something cool. Yeah,
I'd be down for that.
It would be so fun. And whenever Hamza and I do things like that, or he's been thinking a lot recently too about getting back to your art. Like, what are the things that lit you up when we were kids? You,
Totally.
me, that when we were kids, teenagers, and when it wasn't tied to, the kind of capitalist aims that you're talking about, and we're introducing that more into our adult lives.
I think that's so important. I think it's an incredible thought, and I think we all could think about that more. And I would like to as well. Like as I kind of enter this next.
Fortunately, you're on Let's Think This Through. So what did you like to do as a kid?
Yeah. No, I think even if you just kind of stay on that theme of like being, a maker, like I do like to, I just take food for sure. I do like to cook and like prepare a meal and like, take the time to like do it and like learn, but like I don't get nearly as much time to do that as I naturally would like to do, but maybe only on like times when I'm kind of getting away. So more time, doing that. And like I also love like physical adventure, and like experience, like going, like I did right before COVID, I did a 10-day hike in the Alps, and that was so important for me. I think from a personal development perspective, like it just was such a critical point in my life. And being able to do more things like that, I think would be, very important, like challenging yourself physically to do something. I think there's a lot of parallels, obviously, to building a company. So I think things like that are very important. Following intellectual pursuits or like things that you're kind of just passionate about and learning, especially now with everything that's happening with AI, right? Like there's so much opportunity. And then from an art perspective, I think part of it is like almost like going back to like the things that you wish you could have done as a child that you never did. Like I remember I tried to learn an instrument. Like I did 1 year of tenor sax and then I backed out because I was lazy or too distracted with other things, or, other like just other kind of artistic pursuits that you always felt like you had a bit of an itch to like satisfy that you just never followed through on it. Like if as adults we like think about that, I think we can each come up with a few things. I know I definitely could. But yeah.
Were you a Lego kid?
I was a Lego kid. Yeah, totally.
For sure you were a Lego kid. We're going to Legoland.
Yeah. Yeah, I wish I had a Lego light when I was younger. That would have been awesome.
Oh, it's so lit. So if you were to pursue a completely different path that had nothing to do with tech at all, and what do you think it would be?
What do I think it would be?
Yeah. Young Zak, the builder maker. What would it be?
I don't know. Like not related to tech at all.
Yeah, it can't be related to tech in this experiment. That's increasingly tough, I admit.
Yeah, it is. It is increasingly tough. It's increasingly tough. I don't know. Like it's so hard to kind of imagine like, what. Like, I'm a big believer in like, you build a career based on like on talent and like what you're good at, and not necessarily what you're like just passionate about. And like those things can feed each other, but it's hard to kind of imagine like what are the professions that could potentially give me a lot of joy. This is a really hard question, Bailey.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's tough to imagine myself doing anything else. Honestly, it's tough to imagine myself doing anything else. But what else? Yeah. I think if I didn't, I'm even going back all the way back to like, or like if I followed just my general kind of academic track, then I probably would have still ended up in technology in some form. Let me think on that one. That's a tough one.
All right, we'll think on it. I mean, fortunately, you're in the right setting. I have some thoughts, which just based off of how you answered what young Zak would like to do. I think you would probably be so good at planning. Like if we had to like match passion and skills and stuff like
Mhm.
that. Imagine you were planning an adventure travel trip. No, wait. Okay. So I'm just thinking out loud here.
Yeah, I
But,
think.
so adults do adventure travel
Mhm.
and meals are a big part of it. So it's kind of like food tourism as well.
Mhm.
And there's like unique parts of the trip. Like you're not just going to visit, I don't know, the Statue of Liberty. You're also going to that pottery class that you didn't think that you would be going to. So
Mhm.
like bespoke, unique travel
Yeah.
adventure. You'd probably be so good at planning that. And if you want,
Luxury travel experiences, like, or like bespoke travel
no, just
experience.
designing it. We can have someone else do the admin and booking and stuff. But
Like,
like, but yeah, something, or we can, you know what? We can make it a leadership retreat if we
yeah,
really want to add some of our skills there. How about that?
yeah. No, I think that's great. Like, there's, I think I think, yeah, something like that. Experience design.
Mhm.
There's also, something actually you just triggered a thought. Um, I had this weird like thought that I would really love to be a physiotherapist as well.
Oh yeah.
It's
Why?
not a weird. It's maybe out of left field, but like I find
No,
like
that's
I do
great.
consume content. Like I'm really big on kind of like human anatomy and like just
Yeah.
mobility and like and how to repair certain injuries. And
Mm,
I don't know, get a lot of joy and kind of like researching and like thinking about that stuff. I don't know why. Maybe there is
I
something
love
about
it.
this kind of continuous improvement. So maybe there's something there too.
Yeah, mind that works too. Peak performance coach that we were like saying earlier, except there's very distinct bend towards mind body
But
performance, if you will, you know?
yeah, absolutely. That full kind of picture of like you know yeah, health, like mental and physical health, relationships,
Yeah,
um,
so into it
and and work, like performance within the workplace. Absolutely.
and how they overlap.
Yeah.
Okay, well, basically we just planned your life after Lupio. So, actually, do you know what is there life after Lupio? Is that like a thought or is that like a maybe I know if someone asked me what's after skills camp, I don't know if I could answer this at the moment
Yeah.
what that looks like. I could probably, but what let me ask you. What does life look like after Lupio or is that even a thing?
It's there. It will probably be a thing at some point. I know I don't want to do this forever, but I also know that there's a lot of exciting things in front of me for the next few years. And I think generally how I've always thought about this is like the next 2 to 3 years. Like, is there enough meat on the bones, for me to be excited, intellectually stimulated? Is there like some sort of goal that I'm driving towards? And right now, we're at a very interesting time. Like the technology industry, software industry, the last couple of years had a very tough go. Things have been extremely difficult. But at the same time, like 4 or 5 years ago, we had an amazingly incredible like time in our industry that was way better than most industries in the world. And so we've kind of had these peaks and valleys. And I feel I generally am driven by responsibility, to my team, to my investors, to others, and I just feel this immense sense of responsibility to be able to get us to like the next chapter, whether it's another round of funding, an acquisition, potentially something else, whatever it is, right? Like I feel like there's another kind of marker in my mind, but right now, between the things that we're doing, building multiple products, scaling a global team, it's exciting, and I'm learning, and I think that's the most important thing. But beyond Lupio, after that, we would see. I get a lot of satisfaction and pleasure from mentorship and working with earlier stage younger founders, which I do a little bit of right now, and that's amazing to kind of watch.
Yeah, I didn't know.
Share your
That you took,
experience.
I didn't know that you were doing mentorship with such intention.
Yeah, I do some. I do some kind of formal advisory, some informal advisory. People have me on dial with me, and I think I have other entrepreneurs in my network that I use the same way when I need help, and so I think that gives me a lot of joy. So maybe there's some kind of like CEO coaching type of stuff down the line, but I wouldn't feel comfortable jumping into that profession. I would want some more
Something
experience.
tells me you'd have a book to buy.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I'd want. I do think I have another company or multiple companies in me, but they would have to be for the right things. For something different. I think that's maybe the one thing is that like if I were to start another company, it would actually be a different domain or a higher level of risk or something. Just to keep it very interesting. Some friends have told me you should consider, being, when that story is done with you should consider being a hired CEO. So that's an interesting.
I know, like a fractional CEO or something.
No,
like
no, like actually like hired, like full time. Like it's like you get headhunted and hired.
Oh, duh! Like
Yeah.
it did.
Yeah.
How did that not even enter my mind?
Yeah.
Of the non-entrepreneurship version of CEO.
Yeah, that exists as well, right? And so it's just because I think I've had to kind of lead the company through so many different forms, from being bootstrapped to being venture backed and now being private equity backed, and just has seen different domains, right, over the years. And so I don't know, we'll see. I'm okay not knowing, to be honest, Bailey. Like
That's right.
I'm okay, like just to to keep going, doing what I'm doing. Have some of these ideas in mind when the time comes. I'll be able to kind of decide. But I think whenever that happens, it would be nice to have a little bit of time to decelerate. Between lead gigs, whenever they are. But right now, I'm pretty heads down.
Right. Well, are you going to take a pat leave?
Yeah, I will, absolutely.
Nice. So when is that?
That will be next year in March. News hasn't kind of gone out completely yet, but that's the plan right now. When is this going to be posted, by the way?
Not soon.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I will take a little bit of time off, but that'll be in March. We're excited, and again, that's like kind of another chapter of life, right? Like being a parent alongside being a CEO. Like these are things that that's a major evolution for me, and even going.
I think so.
Like those, putting so much of your time and energy towards your work and your identity, right? Like how does that shift when you become a parent? That's going to be a learning experience for me, and I'm ready for it. I think it's going to be exciting, but I know it's definitely there's going to be a learning curve. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I think so. But that's like perfect, because I think last time I don't remember actually. Last time I saw you, I don't know if I said this, but one of the metaphors that I like to think about is one that my coach gave me because I believe that you don't always have to have the answers, but you have to take a step and the answer might reveal itself.
Yeah.
And she gives me this metaphor of walking down. She was in this hotel, and it's kind of the light sensors. So when you walk is when the light turns on.
Yeah.
And I always think about this metaphor of how, as you are taking the step, the next light will turn on, but you can't see it unless you take the step. And 100%. I think this conversation in a year is probably going to be very different.
Yeah.
Just because you are going. I mean, I don't think there's any bigger transition than becoming a parent, and. I think the answer will reveal itself, even if not.
I think that's right, and I think that is so connected to the spirit of being an entrepreneur, right? And being able to work, have a large appetite for uncertainty, and I think that's I'm a big believer in clarity through movement. You've heard this kind of Jeff Bezos metaphor of one-way doors and two-way doors, and most things in business and life are kind of two-way doors where you can reverse and kind of back out, and it's much better to move and get clarity. But then once in a while there are those one-way doors. We have to be very cautious and take more input, and but just understanding when those things exist. But yeah, I do think when I'm stuck mentally, oftentimes a walk will help bring the answer, or just starting on something, right? I think I like that analogy of the hallway and the lights.
Yeah. Well, as we come to the end of this, I usually end every episode with what's called train of thought. So
sure.
I will give you the idea from the last episode, the kind of a summary idea, and then it's your job to connect it to the main idea from this episode, whichever one you choose.
Yeah.
Now, let's start here. What would you say is one of the big ideas from our conversation that sticks out to you?
One of the big ideas from this conversation, I would say, tapping into your identity and authentic leadership. Like, I think that's something that definitely stood out to me in our conversations. And maybe this other idea of like holistic kind of leadership, like 360, between like, I think that I didn't expect that conversation to be as kind of in the forefront as it was. So maybe those are the things that stand out to me.
Okay, so let's pick one, because I know the connection to the other episode, but I don't want to influence it here.
Sure.
So maybe holistic leadership,
Sure.
or the other one you said was authentic leader, like identity and authenticity in leadership.
Yeah, I like the kind of the holistic, or the, like, to call it like whole life leadership.
So how they all play together to make you a good leader.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Holistic life leadership.
Yep.
Now, here's what how the last guest summed up their episode. They said, we shouldn't box ourselves in by reality. We should think bigger, and we may actually find that it's possible. So let me say that again. They said, they said we shouldn't box ourselves in by reality and what's possible today. We should think bigger, and we might actually discover that it's possible.
Good food.
Now, how does that connect in your mind to holistic whole life leadership?
I would say, so if we take that concept of we have to think bigger in order to make it possible, I would think bigger in this context is thinking about all elements of your life, and how that connects back to, your ability and your ability to lead and your overall kind of like performance as a leader. So, if you feel stuck at work, like, have you broadened your horizons to think about your entire life, from your physical to your relationships, and often, like, have you broadened your own kind of horizons in your day to day, to be able to drive that, like, the clarity in what's possible within your workplace? Like, have you done enough to give yourself more perspective, or to see things in a different light? Because there's always another angle to see things. There's always different perspectives, and I think that is the key, right? Have you opened yourself up to the full experiences of life, and been able to kind of harness that to bring it back into your day-to-day leadership?
That's great. Which you know what I love from that too is just, you're stuck at work. Consider something else. Like, consider another bucket of your life that might have the answer. I kind of like that.
Absolutely, yeah. I like this is like, I don't want your listeners to think that like this is something that I have like so figured out and is like I just know to do this every single day. Like, I have to like constantly force myself, and I have friends and family that like help me through this as well. But sometimes, like, taking a break, working out, going on a vacation, reading a book, watching a show, like, these things are the things that ultimately bring us back to our work with more conviction and more clarity. And I do think that more of your job as a leader as a company grows is around, there's more thinking involved, if that makes sense.
It is, right? It does, increasingly so.
Yeah, there's more thinking and being able to, see things more clearly, whether it's inside your company, but also outside of your company. And I think that's because that is your ultimate goal, kind of bringing it back full circle to what we said, is to provide kind of a shared, vision and purpose for your people, and make sure they're, we're all kind of aligned to what we need to do to get there.
Yeah. And even if you're listening and you're not a CEO of a tech company or running your own business, these lessons that everyone, Zak, is telling you and what we're talking about here are very applicable to you in any role. I mean, it doesn't matter what you're doing with your life, even in the role of parent, as you've noted, as in the role of how you were taking on life outside of how you approached even your body or something like that is with the same mentality as you approach leadership. And leadership of self would be certainly the first area I would recommend starting. So
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
Zach, is there
100%.
any other pieces of advice that you'd want to leave people with before we go?
Pieces of advice. Look, I think one of the keys to success over the next, let's just call it 5 to 10 years for any leader, maybe this is like more universal than that. I think the ability to focus is so important. I'm a big fan of like Deep Work, Cal Newport's book, and his kind of writings, but I do feel like just like, especially over the last like 4 or 5 years, the intensity of like information, like the addictiveness of apps, the amount of information we consume, and the ability to do like undistracted like work is getting harder and harder. And like, I can't emphasize like, as you know, as a leader of a team or an organization that is growing in size, like that ability to kind of like think. And like when you have those like 4 or 5 minutes of like break time or rest, to not just like go straight into your app, to like scroll through these dopamine hits. Like I think that skill, like that learning, that kind of like self-discipline, because like, especially when you're working in a remote world where you don't have that kind of social pressure to like stay like focused, like there's something there, and I just think it's only going to get worse. And I just think that like the people that can really start putting in the habits, the systems in their life to be able to really think about that deeply, because I think it's going to take a long time for our academic kind of environments to like catch up to be able to teach the skills. I think the folks that are needed at AOU are doing a lot of this work as well. But I would bring it back to that, because I think that's so important. And yeah, I just wanted to emphasize that. I know we didn't get to it, but I'm still fighting day to day to be able to kind of like, make sure that I'm kind of managing my inputs. And it's getting harder and harder to do, right, with every day that passes.
And one of those inputs being social media, which I know you mentioned
100%.
earlier.
100%. Yeah, I think that's such a big. That's probably the big gorilla, right?
Yeah. I think it's definitely one of the unconscious ones for a lot of people, and I would consider that part of when I was referring to like Hamza's peak performance model, the time, energy, attention. When we get to attention management, that is a huge portion of it every time in peak performance, with anyone, by the way, not just leaders, but with anyone trying to do anything right now. So you're just right there. Yeah.
And I think I would go one step further than social media to specifically unlimited short form content.
Okay.
So there's like that level of specificity. Like I think that is the thing that I think is the crux, right? So anyways, it's another big topic.
No, I mean, I think we need a whole other episode for this one.
Yes, absolutely. Happy to do it anytime.
Or we can just do it in real life. But
yeah.
So Zach, thank you for coming on. Let's think this through.
My pleasure.